You've got the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and then you have the Garden Tomb. You've been to both places. How do you see it?
I usually tell people when I take a tour there, lead a tour there, what you will prefer, of course, is the Garden Tomb.
Of course.
It's a lovely place to meditate, and you got Golgotha conveniently next door, right, and so on. But I tell them it's simply not historical, that we just don't have anything linking it archaeologically or historically. And the place where it probably did happen was the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. I warn them ahead of time. Close your eyes when you're at the resurrection tomb there. You're not going to like what you see, but in terms of longitude and latitude on Earth, this is probably where it happened. Well, how come we don't have that preserved today, the Green Hill far away? Well, I wish we had that today, but through the years, you know what happened. Yet Constantine's engineers and architects come along and try to figure out where this was, because Constantine wanted to erect a church there, and so they took Joseph's tomb and cleared it out from the escarpment where it was located. Now it's isolated. They built a rotunda over it, then later on a separate church over the place where Jesus was crucified, then the resurrection tomb, then they connected it in one church. Look, Jerusalem has been destroyed and rebuilt 13 times. What was Toronto like 200 years ago?
Didn't exist.
Okay. Well, that's the point. Cities grow. And you can't expect Jerusalem to stunt itself and not grow. So today, of course, it's right in the center of the old city of Jerusalem. But in those days, it was outside the city wall.
It was outside the city wall. And I had some Jewish archaeological friends tell me exactly what you said, that with this sacred site, they carved out the area around it and enabled people to come and gather around it. But the point is that wherever the tomb is, it's empty. Now we're talking Good Friday here, but what about the dying on Good Friday? There were a number of cataclysmic events that accompanied the death of Jesus. As an historian, how do you see this?
I know. Matthew, of course, loves to report star and great activities that take place, and so the critics just love to jump in on that one. You know, Matthew always emphasizes the supernatural and so on. Well, now, wait a minute. Do we have any outside evidence? Well, interestingly enough, it's almost hard to believe. We do have reference to both the earthquake and the darkness in material outside of Scripture. There was a historian of wonders, very much like Ripley. Now, believe it or not, by Ripley, the old strip and so forth, most of what Ripley said, and maybe all of it, was really true, believe it or not. You know, it wasn't just sensationalism. Well, here's an ancient version of Believe It or Not by Ripley. His name was Phlegon, P-H-L-E-G-O-N, Phlegon, a writer of Greek wonders. And he said that in the fourth year of the 202nd Olympiad, there was a darkness all over his horizon, and even an earthquake. And he was writing at Nicaea, by the way, talking about Nicaea, which is where the Great Creed, of course, was formulated later on in 325. Now, I then went back to my favorite date for Good Friday on the basis of pretty hard evidence, the 3rd of April, in 33 AD. It turns out that the 4th month of the 4th year of the 202nd Olympiad is April of 33 AD. Wow. So that's not how I arrived at the date. I had the date first. But then I played this evidence into it also. And it turns out that this thing evidently was more broad than we might have thought. Yeah.
And then this veil that was rent in two when Jesus gave up the ghost, as the King James Version puts it. What was that all about?
Well, there is a rabbinical tradition that involves a scholar who was very concerned about the way things were going in Judaism, and he wept for the fall of Jerusalem even 40 years ahead of time. And indeed, the veil itself was, of course, to shield the Holy of Holies from the rest of the temple.
Very thick, I understand.
Yes, very thick indeed. Yeah. And the earthquake itself would have torn this at the time. There's no question about that. And there's reference to that earthquake, believe it or not, in the Jewish rabbinical traditions. So, Jim, every time you get evidence, you know, you find hardly any evidence that controverts the biblical evidence. It may seem to at first until all the archaeology takes place. But time and again, you have these confirmations.
Got about 3 minutes left. Tell me about Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus and the role they played with Jesus' body after he had died.
They're members of the Sanhedrin, both of them are, the official council of 70 of the Jews. We know that they certainly did not concur in the decision that Jesus should be terminated, as the rest of their colleagues did. However, many were not quite sure, but it does seem that all present, sometimes they say all present, condemned him, but we don't know if that certainly didn't include Nicodemus or Joseph of Arimathea. Jesus had come across both of them, of course, in his early ministry. One of the interesting scenes in the Bible is Jesus' nocturnal visit with Nicodemus, as you well recall, who was really one of the intellectuals kind of testing Jesus out in his claims. And so he had never any reason to turn against Jesus, and indeed Joseph had this wonderful new rock-hewn tomb in which he had hoped to be buried in Jerusalem, the holy city, great place to be buried. Hadn't been used yet, and evidently they were colleagues, probably in the faith as well, but secretly for fear of the Jews, as the expression goes. And indeed, it took some courage at first, at the inception of Christianity, to believe this. Later on, of course, we have little trouble believing in the world's most successful phenomenon, strategically considered, numerically considered, 2,250 million, and nothing like it, in any other religious system. Now, it's great today, but in those days, just getting started took a lot of faith. So therefore, they're crypto-Christians, you might say, and they then wanted to see that Jesus' body was properly taken care of. At first, I think probably their hopes must have been pierced that this Messiah would ever rise again, but that's the glory of Easter.
Yeah, and the preparation of the body was quite a routine, wasn't it? I mean, wrapping.
Yeah, it wasn't even complete. That's why the women came out on Sunday morning.
I understand they would put layers and layers of cloth and spices between the layers, and it'd be almost like a body cast.
Something like it, yeah, indeed. By the way, we can prove historically that the tomb was empty.
How can we prove it?
Well, this is the last two chapters in my book, In the Fullness of Time. I really trotted out the whole argumentation, and the two basic arguments are one that you've always heard of, and that is, hey, how could Christianity ever have gotten started if there were a dead body on the hands? I mean, this is one argument that's never been countered. That alone proves it as far as I'm concerned. But what I did was to adduce evidence from the outside. Jewish rabbinical traditions also admit the tomb was empty. They never say the tomb was empty. They say the body was stolen.
Right.
Well, say the body was stolen, empty tomb, same thing. So we can really prove historically. I can't categorically prove the resurrection for you, okay? And I think that's how God wanted it. Else where would faith be if you didn't have total proof? But the empty tomb, we can prove.